no? But still you get complaints because they say, no, but I studied this and you didn't put questions about this. And so, because the students want to see something that covers in a way aspects that they think are important. And so in this regard, interpretations is a very important section, because you want to take you want to evaluate, or digamos, you want to assess those things that you think are a clear reflection of what you have seen in class, no? But at the same time, you want them to be the most meaningful. You want them to be that anybody analyzing can generalize the results, and that it's meaningful and sufficient. No? Great. Okay, and so can we do this section that says, what do we need to assess? No? Intended interpretations. Yeah. So Abby, can you read this section, please? What do we need to assess?
Okay.
Intended interpretations. Thank you.
Let me see. Okay, in the okay, as we indicate in chapter 2, our interpretations will be based on the assessment records, verbal description, or test scores. I can see because
That we
I have the
arrive.
panel. Okay, I know. I can read. That we arrived at on the basis of our students' performance on an assessment. In order to interpret these assessment records as indicators of our students' levels of language ability, we will need to define the specific area or areas of language ability we want to assess. These definitions will constitute our intended interpretations.
Exactly, intended interpretation. So what is an intended interpretation? Please read.
An intended interpretation is the understanding about our students' language ability, which we want to arrive at on the basis of their assessment records.
Records. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you see now we go from the bottom up. No, exactly. No. So we need the records. No. Because our interpretations will be based on the assessment records. No, that could be, for example, verbal descriptions, test scores, that may be an observation list, or with some indicators, rubrics, something. No, okay, and of course we arrive at these scores through the student's performance, no? Entonces ahí vamos desde abajo hacia arriba, no? The assessment, first you make the assessment, then you have your student's performance. The student's performance will give you some records. You take the records and you interpret, no? You make interpretations. The interpretation is basically on the language ability. Of course, in order to define the specific areas, I mean, in order to do this, you will need to specify, you know, define and specify the area or areas of language ability that you want to assess. And so this is what we know, sorry, what it's called intended interpretations. No, it is your understanding as a teacher about the student's language ability that you want to arrive at. Es la habilidad a la que yo quiero que mis alumnos lleguen. Y la base is the records, on the basis of their assessment records. And then with these interpretations, then you have the intended decisions, and then you have the intended consequences. No? Okay, so let's continue with this section. We have identifying the interpretations we need for making decisions. No? That is relevance and sufficiency. Okay, so our intended interpretations need to be relevant to the decisions that we need to make. So what is relevance here? No? So we're gonna have a volunteer, please, to read this section. Relevance, the concept of relevance.
Let's see.
Me, prof.
Thank you very much, the lady.
Okay, is the degree to which the intended interpretations provide information the test user needs to make the decision.
Needs to make the
Shall I
decision.
continue?
Yeah, yeah, but I want to ask you if when you are elaborating a quiz, assessment task, do you think about this? No? Do you think about the degree to which when you're testing the student's ability, that you're going to get information, you know, that will help you later make a decision? Do you think about all this process?
Yes, of course, because
Yes. Huh?
maybe I consider that relevance is related, if we are talking about degree, maybe it's related with the difficulty of my test, I suppose. I'm not sure about it. But I think that yes, relevance must be taken into account when
You
we
take
are
it.
doing a test. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Relevance in this case means only that when you elaborate a quiz, do you make sure that the test contains items, llamémosle items instead of questions,
Okay.
items that will be a reflection of the information that you need to collect, no? To
the most important things that they have seen when they were
exactly.
Class. Okay.
Great, exactly. So think about relevance in those terms, ¿no? Que esta información, que estas preguntas que pongo vayan a darme información precisa, ¿no? De lo que luego yo quiero decidir. Quiero decidir a quién les voy a dar nivelación, quién va al examen final, a quién le exonero de un examen que a veces se da. And so, but I need to make sure that that one of my interpretations, you know, is relevance, no? That I'm using items that will give me this, that will allow me to ultimately, you know, make the right decisions, no? So that is a relevance. So yeah, and can you read the next section, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
In considering relevance, we need to think about how useful the intended interpretation will actually be for making the intended decisions. For formative decisions aimed at providing feedback to our students and to ourselves for improving learning and instruction. We need to provide interpretations about how well students have mastered specific learning objectives. For summative decisions, such as which students will pass or not pass a language course, we need to provide interpretations about how well students have mastered the learning objectives of the entire course. For decisions about the students' readiness to use the language in context outside of the language class, we need to provide interpretations about their ability to use the language needed in this context.
In this context.
Yes.
And then we have a little something on the next page, or maybe on the next passage.
Yes. Do I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. To help assure the relevance of our interpretations, we need to do the following. Think about or consult with other test users about the intended decisions. Identify interpretations about our students' language ability that we believe will help us make the decisions to be made.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so here's a good thank you very much. Here's a good piece of advice. No, in order to make sure, no, that there's relevance in your interpretation, you can consult a colleague, no, which will be another test user, no, podría ser el profesor que que también tiene el paralelo, tiene el otro paralelo. For example, you have A and he has parallel B, no? So you can consult with him about the intended decisions, no? And see if you agree, and if the test that you have or the task has this element, no, of relevance, the interpretation, no? Right. Okay, and then this second piece of advice is good, no? Identify interpretations about our students' ability that we believe will help us make the decisions, to be made. Great, and then we have this. In addition to relevance, we need to make sure that the intended interpretation is sufficient, no, for making the intended decision. Now, what is sufficiency? What is sufficiency? I'd like to have another volunteer, please, to read sufficiency and then the example in the next paragraph.
Here, Professor.
Thank you very much. What's your name again? Christian. Hi, Christian.
Okay, the part that says sufficiency.
Thanks. Yes, please, sufficiency.
Okay, sufficiency is the degree to which the intended interpretations provide enough information for the test user to make a decision. I continue?
Yes.
Okay, in considering sufficiency, we need to think about whether or not a single assessment will provide enough information for making the decisions. For low-stakes formative decisions based on a single lesson, a single interpretation from a single assessment based on the content of that lesson or unit might be sufficient. For high-stakes summative decisions, such as passing or not passing a grade, however, multiple assessments are likely to be necessary to assess an entire year's achievement. For decisions such as this, we might give our students several short assessments during the year and one larger assessment at the end of the year, and then combine the results of this to arrive at the interpretation typically reported as a grade or mark, which will be sufficient for the intended decision. To address the sufficiency of your interpretations, you need to do the following. First, think about or consult with other test users about all the information that you will need to make and intend decisions. Identify interpretation about our students' language ability that you will need in order to make the intended decisions. For example, can I obtain this interpretation for a single assessment? Or if not, what additional assessment will I need?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, this passage is very important, you know, and I think it's very, very clear. No, we have formative decisions, we have summative decisions, we have low stake decisions, we have high stake, medium and high stake decisions. So it all depends on what or which of these you are working towards, no? And so, for example, if you need to make sure, for example, the typical case where you in level 1, digamos, yeah, you're learning vocabulary about, I don't know, the house, no? Right? And so maybe the formative decision is to provide the students with, I mean, sorry, no, the decision that you want to make, partamos from the decision. The decision you want to make is formative because you want to know how much more the students need in order to master the vocabulary, and you can easily complement this in one class, no? And so you do the assessment because you have in mind to do a little review. And how much review do you do will depend on the records and then the interpretations that you give. No? And so maybe you decide that only one class or 20 minutes should be enough, and you continue with the next topic. Entonces ahí se acaba the process, no? With the decision that you had in mind, because it's formative and because it's low stake. No? Now, on the contrary, if you're thinking about a summative decision and it's high stake, for example, if you're working in sexto curso, right, and you working in este programa IB, no, the Bachillerato Internacional, you need to make sure that the students are ready, no, for the challenge of studying in the university abroad. And so in this case, you might need several different tasks. No? Okay, you will need to compile, no, a number of tasks all year long. Okay, and also you need to make sure that the interpretation, because it's high stakes, no, is going to be sufficient. No, that you need to aquí habría que dar elementos, no, what they call evidence, no. In schools, they love the word evidencia. So you will need to have evidence that you have collected a number of samples of tasks, and that the student is eventually ready for university and abroad, or is not ready, you know, if the decision is yours, or maybe the decision is the director of the school. You know? And so that's what a sufficiency means, no, in the sense of the interpretations. And so you need to ask yourself this, no? Can I obtain these interpretations from a single assessment? Okay. Okay, if that's the case, great. No, you start planning the next assessment. But if not, what other assessments will you need? No? So you need to start thinking about what new assessment you need to prepare. No? Right. Entonces ahí puede ser, no sé, un test que sea extensión, ¿no? Que repita algunos, some items from the first test, but expand to other, to more content, no? Okay. Because you need to have a sample that is sufficient, no? For you and for others to decide on something big, no? Right, so that is a sufficiency. Right, and so I want you to, we have a few minutes, 5 minutes, I think. So I want you to think about a practical example, you know, of a test that you have done recently. And I want you to analyze if the interpretation was relevant, if it was sufficient, and what is the other one? Relevant? Not just those two, no? Relevant and sufficient. Think about any example, any level, any task, quiz. I want you to reflect on these two questions. If you think that the interpretation was relevant to the decision that you had in mind, and if it was sufficient for the decision that you had in mind. for the intended decision. And of course, tell me what this ultimate decision, intended decision was, no? Yeah, so I'll give you 1 minute, please. Think about it. Think about any recent tasks that you administered in your school. Okay, so anybody, please, somebody?
Would you mind repeating the question, Prof?
Yeah, think about an assessment that you have administered recently. Yeah, and the question is if in analyzing this assessment, do you think that that the interpretation was relevant, no, for the decision that you had in mind, or and also if it was sufficient, no, sufficient. And think about the decision that you had in mind, no? One example of decision is, for example, you wanted to administer the test because you wanted to make sure that everybody understood this lesson, and your decision is, will I continue this lesson? Will I finish today with the quiz? Or if the quiz is the grades are very low, I'm going to need 2 extra classes or something. So maybe that's the decision. But that's an example, no? Now, what was the decision you had in mind? No?
Yeah, based on what you said, it reminds me of when I was one of the final classes I taught was that I don't really remember it. I think it was about the use of either, neither, you know, and other topic that I don't remember right now. Well, in that class, what I originally planned was to cover the topics of neither and either in the first stage of the class, the first hour of the class,
the first hour,
and then jump into the other topic. Therefore, I prepared 2 activities, and based on those, on the first activity, I will then continue to the next one. However, my students weren't responded as I intended. So what I had to do was to take a time of the second part of the lesson and extend my explanation. So I don't think it was sufficient.
Okay, good.
I didn't achieve my main goal.
Exactly. And you had to make a decision.
Exactly. Based on that, I had to make the decision, okay, I cannot cover those, the 2 topics, but I can cover this one topic and ensure that they understand it completely, you know, and to make a good job there.
Good, very good. Great. That's a very good example, no? So it's clear, no, that the intended decision was to determine if you will continue on with the next topic or because the topic is difficult, you decide to separate. No, for example, one day you teach neither, and then you teach either, and maybe then you put them together. No, it's those decisions that we have to sometimes make every day. No, con este carácter formative. No, formative. You want to make sure that they really understand. No? And so you contribute with more examples, extra class, extra instruction, okay, because you want them to learn. No? And so in your case, it wasn't sufficient, not sufficient. You need